Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to On Trial, starring Mark Radulich, also starring Sean Comer. Hope you're ready, Hollywood, because you're on trial.
All rise. Court is now in session. The Honorable Judge Fudge presiding. I am your host, the mandated reporter, and frankly, I'm mortified, Mr. Mark Radulich, and I'll be playing the part of prosecution tonight as we put the 2003 20th Century Fox Marvel Jam Daredevil on trial. Joining me tonight is my co-host, Mr. Sean Comer. How do you do, sir?
Franklin P. Nelson for the defense, Your Honor.
That's what I like to hear. How's it going tonight?
I like beer. I like coffee. I like them even better when I have them both right side by side, and I can just alternate one after the other. I allow myself one beer per night, and that's why I keep my fridge stocked with about 10 or 12 bottles of Guinness at a time.
One of my favorite Ailstorm songs has the line, "We are here to drink your beer," and I say it frequently. In fact, I've gotten my son to say it, that we are here to drink your beer. It's pretty amusing.
Motherfucker, drink my beer without asking. They only do it once.
Motherfucker, take my beer, get shot. All right. This is your 60-minute courtroom drama here, folks. As I said, we're going to be looking at, this week we looked at a Daredevil comic. We looked at the Defender series, which starred the new Daredevil, Charlie Cox, who has had 2 seasons of his own on Marvel, on Netflix. So tonight we are ending the trifecta with Ben Affleck's Daredevil, the precursor, the audition, if you will, to him playing the Batman in Batman v Superman. And who knows at this point if he's going to continue to play the Batman in any of these Warner Brothers films going forward. It's a mixed-up mix. But let's go ahead and get started. You know the drill. We go to Sean for some notes, and then I do a brief plot synopsis. And then the prosecution does their thing, the defense has their say, and then the prosecution has the final word. We have some conclusive words, and then we are out of here like last year. So, Sean, let's hear some notes from you on 2003's Daredevil.
Thank you very much, Your Metalness. You know, I kind of like what we did last week, wherein instead of giving you a rundown of some useless IMDb notes, I kind of pick a topic that's relevant to what we're going to discuss and decide to expound briefly upon that. And when it comes to Daredevil, this week I want to elaborate a little bit on the topic of the alternate or unrated director's cut, whatever you want to call it. Basically, we're talking about any instance in which a movie hits theaters, then hits DVD or Blu-ray, and is swiftly accompanied by a cut that was not seen by theatrical audiences. It can be for any number of reasons. Sometimes it carries the same rating, but just happens to have some previously edited out footage interspersed back into it. Sometimes it's a cut that changes the rating of a movie entirely, as was the case famously with 2003's 20th Century Fox debacle, Daredevil. Now, in theaters, among fans and among critics, the movie was essentially savaged, and not entirely fairly. I mean, really, when we looked at the advertisements, it didn't look that bad. I mean, we didn't see anything glaringly disconcerting about it. But then we all sat down to watch it. We all sat down to watch it, and a funny thing happened. It seemed like it wasn't exactly the movie that somebody or other intended. And as it turned out, we were right, because the initial cut of Daredevil was actually intended to be rated R. That's right. This take on some of the darker periods of Daredevil's comic run was actually meant to be every bit as bloody, grim, gritty, and unflinching as the best example would be Frank Miller's run on the book was. But instead, what we got seemed like it was trying to pull back from that, but in doing so, it ended up coming off as a half measure. In addition to performances by Ben Affleck and Jennifer Garner that were ultimately widely panned, despite scene-stealing Colin Farrell and the surprisingly strong Michael Clarke Duncan, something just didn't quite feel right. It felt like a half measure. And as we found out when Daredevil hit DVD, well, turns out the initial intention was for the movie to be rated R. In fact, there was an entire subplot that was entirely dropped from it that involved an accused murderer played by Coolio. In addition, the R-rated cut was seen more as probably the vision that director Mark Steven Johnson probably intended for it. That isn't to say that we're exactly talking about the first Iron Man movie, the first Avengers. We're not even really talking about either of the two Thor movies or the Incredible Hulk. Yet, what we got in either case still wasn't quite as bad as Ghost Rider or the Fantastic Four. This is what happens sometimes. A studio ends up ultimately getting involved and kind of imposing their agenda on a director, and results occasionally vary. Sometimes, as was the case when Richard Donner was bumped off of working on Superman 2, we end up getting a replacement director who still does at least a competent job of actually finishing out the movie and giving us something watchable. As has been the case with other movies, such as the rather impassioned rant that I delivered once upon a time about Paranormal Activity 3, the director's cut actually ultimately ends up wondering why they released what they did into theaters in the first place, because what they left on the cutting room floor was either clearly superior or something that actually helped make the movie make a lick or two more of goddamn sense. It's unfortunate when it happens, but it's always interesting to go back and at least give some of these unrated or director's cuts a look, because while sometimes it just involves an inconsequential scene here or there, in others, what we see on DVD is more like the unrated cut of Dawn of the Dead or the director's cut of Donnie Darko. We end up getting something that entirely changes our perception of a movie, sometimes making a good one great, or sometimes making a confusing as fuck movie, hi Donnie, make maybe just a lick or two more sense. Sorry, that was a bit of a ramble. I've been working all day, but I assure you it'll be relevant when we get to my argument.
Okay. Thank you, Sean, for that. Let's go ahead and delve into what could be laughingly called the plot of this movie. We begin with Daredevil, who is high atop a church in Hell's Kitchen. He falls to the ground. We get a bit of narration, and we then flash back to Matt Murdock as a child. We get some history on him and his father. We get the father being killed ostensibly by the Kingpin when he refuses to throw a fight. We get Matt Murdock being blinded and then discovering that in his blindness he has new powers related to like sonar, essentially, where his senses are heightened. From there, we move to a courtroom sequence where a business associate of the Kingpin is able to walk after essentially sexually assaulting a woman, which then leads to a sequence where Daredevil enters a bar where this particular person is at and fights everyone in the bar for some strange reason, chases him into a subway and essentially commits manslaughter as he kicks him off the platform and the guy breaks his back and then is run over by a train. Here is where we meet Ben Urich. We get the Daredevil logo in flames. We then move to Matt Murdock and Foggy, played by Jon Favreau, sitting in a coffee shop, and in walks Elektra, which is then followed by a scene where, I'm not going to editorialize, there'll be enough of this when I do my prosecution, but in walks Elektra. Matt becomes smitten with her. He follows her to the outside. She doesn't like to be touched. They kung fu fight. And it turns out after kung fu fighting one another, they happen to like one another. Somewhere along the line, the Kingpin hires Bullseye to kill Elektra's father, which he does, but he does it with one of Daredevil's nunchucks. And so Elektra thinks Daredevil did it. This leads later on to a sequence where Elektra, in her Elektra costume, such as it is, fights Daredevil on top of a building. She unmasks him. She realizes that it's Matt, whom they've slept together at this point, and they've danced together, and there's love between the two. Anyway, she unmasks him, realizes that it's Matt, and then realizes all along that he's been... This is after she's run him through the shoulder, by the way. I should point out. So after she's done stabbed him in the shoulder, she unmasks him. She realizes that it's Matt, and Matt's been telling her the truth all along, that it's not him who killed her father, it's Bullseye. She goes to fight Bullseye. Bullseye runs her through. There's a final confrontation between Daredevil and Bullseye is eventually taken out and arrested by the police. Daredevil then goes after the Kingpin. They have a fight. Matt breaks his knees. Daredevil breaks his knees, but decides not to kill him because he's the good guy. Mind you, he's killed people in this movie, but, he's the good guy, so he doesn't... That's literally what he says. I'm not the bad guy. Okie dokie. So the Kingpin is arrested. Urich figures out that Matt Murdock is Daredevil, but decides not to reveal his true identity, and Matt Murdock continues to be Daredevil. After midway through the movie, sort of questioning whether or not he should be bothered with the whole thing. So that's the movie in a nutshell. If you can find the plot, raise your hand. Woof. Let us begin our prosecution with that very notion. This movie has no plot. It tries, but you essentially get a series of strung together sequences, and we're a good 35 minutes into the movie before anything resembling a plot even begins to happen. Essentially, this movie is about Matt Murdock falling in love with Elektra, and for some reason, the Kingpin wanting to kill her dad. That's essentially it. It is the biggest problem I have with Daredevil, other than some of the acting, is that while they capture brooding very well, and in terms of it being a character piece about Matt's struggle, and Matt's Catholic guilt and all of that, it's just a series of strung together sequences. Some are stronger than others. All of the stuff with Bullseye is hilarious. Colin Farrell steals every scene that he's in as Bullseye and is downright comedic in his performance. Meanwhile, Ben Affleck's portrayal of Matt Murdock and subsequently Daredevil oscillates between somewhat brooding and interesting, sometimes flip as Matt Murdock, but ultimately just kind of boring and bland. I don't think he acts badly as so much as he acts uninterestingly. And Jennifer Garner couldn't act her way out of a paper bag in this movie. Michael Clarke Duncan is ultimately wasted as the Kingpin because he doesn't do anything. And so, as I said, the biggest problem with Daredevil is that if you're trying to do a character piece, it misses because the characters aren't all that interesting. I mean, you can't have a movie where about halfway through it you introduce a video game boss who's kind of funny at times. That's not enough. There isn't enough going on with Matt Murdock to make this as a character piece an interesting movie, because he's kind of flat. And all of the Jennifer Garner Elektra stuff sucks. Her performance sucks. Her portrayal of Elektra sucks. Her line delivery is high school play level bad. It's so bad. To the point where, and so much of the movie is spent on her and Ben Affleck, to the point where their scenes aren't believable. So as a viewer, you're watching this thing, and it's a lot of, and really after the flashback sequence, it's a lot of boring sequences of actors not clicking. And the only thing that you have left then are the fight sequences. I'd also like to take issue with costuming. This is not necessarily something I attack on a regular basis. It's not something I care a whole lot about. And oftentimes in many movies, it's not really a problem. But after watching the movie twice now within a month and reading some of the reviews of the movie to sort of give myself an idea of what I wanted to talk about tonight, let's compare, and maybe this isn't fair, but let's compare 2003's Daredevil to the Marvel Netflix series Daredevil starring Charlie Cox. So here we have a Matt Murdock who has decided that the cops are not to be trusted. They are corrupted. The system is corrupted. And when the system fails, there needs to be another element out there to even the scales of justice. So he takes to the night, and he fights those that need to be fought. But he's doing so in a bandana over his eyes, because he's the blind ninja, you see, and tights. Just regular black tights. And it isn't until midway towards the end of season 1 that he has a suit, but the only reason he has the suit is he learns of a material that is light in weight but can save him from a knife thrust. He comes to realize this because the Kingpin has a suit that is also essentially armor, light in weight but effective against certain attacks. So he has the suit made, and he gives it a little flair with the horns because he is the devil of Hell's Kitchen. See how that all makes sense? See how he doesn't necessarily call himself Daredevil. It's a nickname he kind of earns as he does his deeds throughout Hell's Kitchen, and the costume comes along kind of naturally out of a need to not be stabbed or shot. It's the same thing with Batman Begins. Batman Year One, the comic book, a similar thing. The costume comes very naturally out of a need to not be killed while you're fighting as a vigilante in the streets. Now let's look at 2003's Daredevil. He's wearing a leather bondage outfit with the Daredevil logo on the side. Now, Batman purposely dressed up in an outfit to scare the shit out of criminals because criminals are a cowardly lot. What the fuck is Daredevil doing? He's in a bright red gimp costume with did he decide he was Daredevil? Did he give himself that moniker? See how it's a lot of unearned stuff going on here, and it's just, it's essentially the writers of this movie going, well, you came to see Daredevil, so here's Daredevil. That works in the comic books, but as we've seen in film, you have to earn those things. You have to earn the name, which oftentimes one of the tropes in these movies is that it comes from a reporter giving you that nickname. You are the Batman. You are the devil of Hell's Kitchen. It's very rare you have an Iron Fist situation. I am the immortal Iron Fist. Will you dub yourself that name? So I have a real problem with Ben Affleck's costume in this, that it's completely unearned and looks ridiculous. But my favorite costume ridiculousness is Elektra, when she decides to take to the night. Now, they established earlier in the movie that she's had a new sensei every year since birth, essentially. It's how she became a ninja herself. And when she decides she's going to, as a ninja, fight the man who killed her father, she also dresses up in a leather bondage outfit. I understand comic books be comic books, and they're trying to honor the comic book in some of these costumes. But think it through, people. She looks ridiculous. Her boobs are all hanging out. Her midriff is hanging out. It's like, come on. you're out there with your size and you're wanting to kill them, avenge your father's death. You're not going to dress up that way. And if you do, you deserve to be stabbed. Speaking of stabbed, my last and final point, the overall problem with Daredevil is the plot issue. The secondary part is the terrible acting on some of the players' parts. The third is the costuming. It looks silly and it's not earned. Those are the three legs of the table that make Daredevil a shitty movie. What I want to talk about next is somewhat of a nitpick, but it bears talking about. So Daredevil is stabbed through the shoulder. I mentioned this before. Okay? He is stabbed through the joint between his shoulder and his arm. And he's, this is after Elektra's kicked the shit out of him, and he's left lying on the ground, and she unmasked him, and oh shit, it's Matt. Okay. So he should not be able to have use of his arm at this point. Daredevil doesn't have a healing factor. He's not Wolverine. He also doesn't have the ability to leap tall buildings in a single bound like fucking Superman. But I digress, and I'll get to that momentarily. The entire final act of this movie, post him being stabbed through the shoulder, he miraculously has use of that arm. I say again, he was stabbed through the shoulder. The actual thigh went right through. You could see the tip come out. That's the end. He shouldn't be able to use that arm, and yet he does. In fact, in the fight with Bullseye in the church, he's swinging around like that man and using both of his arms. I mean, this is the kind of thing, everyone take a drink. I'm about to make a wrestling reference. This is the kind of thing Jim Cornette talks about in terms of selling. If you don't sell the injury and make it look like a real fight's happening, no one's going to buy into it, and essentially you're just doing an acrobatic act. And he does do acrobatic acts. He's flipping around that church like nobody's business, and he's doing so with no hint that his fucking arm hurts. It's the silliest thing I've ever seen. Does bring me to a gripe I have with a lot of the action sequences. And I read a lot of reviews that talked about the action sequences being somewhat the saving grace of this movie. I would declare that it's not. That even the action sequences sort of fall flat. There's some fun stuff with Bullseye throwing things that looks interesting, but where it loses me is Daredevil leaping over buildings. Yes, he does have the use of the grappling hook, and when he uses the grappling hook, I'm kind of okay with it. But there were sequences in that church fight, as well as earlier on in the movie, where he's a ninja. He's not the man. He's not Superman. He's not the Hulk. He shouldn't be able to jump that high. We're talking flat-footed, able to jump several stories in the air. Give me a fucking break. Like, I can handle him diving off a building and swinging like Spider-Man with his grappling hook. I'm willing to buy that. I am not willing to buy him jumping 2-3 stories in the air. Your witness, sir.
Thank you, Fudgy the Judgy. So, boy, thank you. With some of those ill-made points, I actually get to skip my bit where I talk about the director's cut for a little bit. So, thank you. You helped lend my argument a little bit of structure. So, to start with, let's begin with discussing the costumes, because that's a moderately easy one, at least in one case, to punch a few holes in. First off, let's start with Matt there. You raised issue with him having not earned the costume. Well, it's funny. In Tim Burton's Batman, I don't seem to remember you complaining that he hadn't earned the armor yet. That was a decidedly more elaborate costume than he was traipsing about Gotham in Batman Year One. I mean, in Year One, that was even more of a makeshift set of duds. I mean, come on. But as far as it looking ridiculous, now, this is possibly just my headcanon, but go with it here. I understand the look a little bit, actually. I mean, it's not the same thing as in the Netflix TV series in which Matt finds out about this super lightweight, flexible material that'll protect him from most weapon attacks. That's not it. What I think it is I think that they went with the full body leather for a couple of reasons. Number one, you have a color that's going to blend in relatively well at night, which I seem to recall, I think, and I could be wrong here, and I'm really hoping against hope that Ben Cologne or Jesse Starcher or even Cole Marentat's going to be listening to call me out on this. I think that's one of the reasons why in the comics he went from his original yellow and black suit to a red one, was partially because it stuck out less after dark. But the other reason is, as we see on a number of occasions, Matt must still be relatively new to this because he's still getting his ass handed to him on a fairly regular basis in some of these fights. I mean, well, I should say, if not utterly getting his ass handed to him, he's at least taken a few good licks along the way. He's not exactly untouchable. And he sometimes has to take some nasty tumbles, evidently through windows. You can imagine the possibility of him having to take a nasty roll when he's role when he's scaling rooftops or coming down off of a building. And, folks, I don't know out there if you've ever seen what a nasty case of road rash looks like after a motorcycle accident. It ain't nothing to fuck with. So, and no, we don't exactly get a sequence wherein Matt goes and fully makes his costume for exactly that reason. It's not like how we got a little bit of a montage that showed how Peter Parker kind of evolved the spider suit to kind of keep weeding out the flaws of it when he first started Spider-Manning. That's because that's the reason why motorcyclists wear leather. It's not just for the looks. It's because if you go down, good sturdy leather, if you buy the right kind, will not only not feel constricting while you're riding. Because I used to work out at Wilson's Leather, and I would see guys that would come in, say they were looking for a jacket to wear on their bike. One of the first things they would do is they'd put it on, zip it all the way up, and then put their arms up about where their handlebars would be, because they wanted to make sure that it was gonna feel snug, but not so tight that it was going to be restrictive. So if I had to hazard a guess, I would say that's probably why they went with the full body leather. Was not necessarily probably because Matt Murdock was thinking, oh shit, this looks cool. He's thinking, I'm going to fuck up my absolute everything if I go out there in a black sweatsuit and I have to go rolling around on a roof. So that part makes sense. Now, as far as Elektra goes, so anyway, that's enough talking about the costume.
What an admission of guilt if I've ever heard one.
I ain't gonna try to justify that stupid shit. I mean, I'm not going to hand this case to you and just outright concede it. But the closest I'm going to come is the notion that I think Elektra theoretically was going for the same thing Daredevil was, but just executing it painfully badly. And we're talking about Jennifer Garner here. We're talking about somebody who made her name on an action-oriented hour-long TV drama. I gotta wonder if at some point she had to have asked them. So wait, hang on a second. You got me running around doing what? And you think Elektra would be wearing this? I look like I should be talking Daredevil into a 2-for-1 lap dance. I mean, there's not even a half-assed justification. Fuck, in Metal Gear Solid 5, when people were asking, why the hell is Quiet's everything falling out of her outfit? At least we got the bullshit justification of, she has an unusual condition in which she has to breathe through her skin. We didn't even get that. You could have tried to tell me. Elektra's respiratory system actually works through her six-pack. At least you would have tried. At least you would have tried something. But that takes care of that. So that being said, let's move along talking about the actual performances, because it's going to lead right into my next point. First off, I've really come to grips over the years with the notion that Ben Affleck has been unfairly maligned for this movie. And it's not just for the fact that he's proven since then that he's capable of much better, because he had proven that before he made this movie. He proved that in Chasing Amy and Good Will Hunting. No, I say that because I have a hard time holding him entirely at fault, because he actually plays an excellent Daredevil and Matt Murdock. He's just playing the wrong Daredevil and Matt Murdock. You see, much of this movie was based on a period in the comics when Daredevil, after years of fighting the good fight in Hell's Kitchen, was just psychologically broken by a number of factors. And that was when he went to that truly dark, violent, barely gives any manner of a fuck place, where we kind of find him just when he's starting out in this movie. But here we have the same that was created by trying to shoehorn some semblance of the comic Death of Superman plot into Batman v Superman. And that's the idea that you're trying to tell in some way this story with this side of this character that was really well built up. And at this point, you're talking about just dropping us right into it without giving us any notion of certain things having happened to this man already. In this movie, they haven't happened yet. And yet, he's in the same place he was in that story. And that's why it just doesn't work. Is because in the comics, you have this idea that Matt has been broken down and beaten and made kind of a dark shadow of himself by the fact that Karen Page's entire life has been just pretty much flushed by a number of vices. He's watched Elektra be killed by Bullseye in a cold, brutal fashion. He has pretty much, just in general, just about the worst goddamn love life in the entire Marvel universe, with the possible exception of maybe Peter Parker. He has categorically the worst kept secret identity in the Marvel universe. But in this movie, we don't get any of that build-up because it's a movie. You can't tell that story that quickly. We're just dropped right in to broody, angry, violent, fairly dark Daredevil. And it lacks the impact. It really does. Now, as far as Jennifer Garner as Elektra, you know who I really enjoyed? I really enjoyed Colin Farrell as Bullseye. In fact, he did a fine job really making up for the fact that it's almost like how entertaining and just scenery chewing and charismatic his performance was, probably due in no small part for a change. He didn't have to mask his natural Irish accent. He made up for the fact that, well, Elektra is... I mean, Jennifer Garner was physically cut out for the role. She was more than physically up for it. She was a perfect match for it in that sense. Right down to falling out the goddamn leather crop top. But just acting-wise, she would be the first of two people that would just make us all wonder, why is this such a damn hard character for people to get right? What is so difficult about this? I mean, you can give a character emotional weight. It's okay. It's fine to do that. Nobody's going to think any less of you. Because, unfortunately, that's a good segue into talking about how the story of the theatrical cut really fails in ways that the R-rated cut doesn't. And number one is the fact that the theatrical cut focuses to an excessive degree on the romance between Matt and Elektra. It's not even between Daredevil and Elektra. It's just between Matt and Elektra. And the problem you have there is you just have no chemistry whatsoever between these two, and yet miraculously they later ended up married. Every scene it's dragged down. It's dragged down by that, and they keep coming back to it and coming back to it and coming back to it, and making that a major thread of the story. Whereas in the R-rated cut, and I apologize because I misspoke earlier, Coolio was not an accused murderer. He was an accused drug addict. You had that to come back to better flesh out the character of Matt and give a little more time to really invest in him. And it was offset by what was the more brutal, violent tone, which the studio tried to pull back from, and it ultimately ended up being a case wherein the studio half-assed what was otherwise really the right direction to go in, as Netflix demonstrated. For all we know, I mean, the R-rated cut of this movie might as well be seen as a decent rough draft for the Netflix series. And I do mean that. I do mean rough draft. Again, we're not talking about something that if you go and watch the R-rated cut, you're going to come back and say, holy shit, forget Spider-Man 2, forget X2, forget Iron Man Avengers, all American movies, all of it. That is the best Marvel movie ever made. It's not that good. It still has its problems. It at least feels more like the Daredevil that you get the sense that they were going for. You have something more balanced, and that's a little bit more personal. It's more focused just on Matt and his night gig as Daredevil, and it's not so much of trying to tell a really forced love story. Now, just to clarify, you mentioned not having any idea why Kingpin was after Elektra's father. No, there's actually a plot point to that. Early in the movie, there's a scene in which we're gifted the exposition that in some vaguely explained way, Elektra's father has helped Kingpin to organize and keep his criminal empire under the radar and give it the facade of legitimacy. He comes forward, I imagine, after some kind of bout of conscience, and says, "I'm out. Buy me out. I don't want anything to do with this anymore. Just let me go." Well, Kingpin then targets him because it's the idea of tying up loose ends. He doesn't want the offhand chance that once he's free and clear, his conscience is going to get even louder, and he's going to go say some things that he shouldn't be saying. So that makes it a little more clear. But again, there was a reason why I brought up the idea of alternate cuts. And that is that the proof is in the pudding when it comes to the R-rated to the R-rated cut. And you could even say that, yes, there is a good Daredevil movie out there, and it was this movie. It just wasn't the version that you paid $5, $6, $7, $10, whatever, to see in theaters. And the fact is, the critics who watched this one, while they agreed that it still had its flaws, some people still thought that Duncan was still a little too over the top as Kingpin. I disagree. I actually thought he was outstanding for what was expected of him. But they felt that it was a more authentic interpretation of Frank Miller's Daredevil run, which was what inspired this take on it in the first place. It's still focused on, Matt grappling with his Catholic guilt. And to be perfectly honest, if this had been released in theaters, I don't think we would have been sitting around today saying, Logan and Deadpool were the movies that really proved that an R-rated superhero movie could do well at the box office. No, because the studio stepped in when they shouldn't have. They wanted to play it too safe, and actually, just occurred to me, it was the same fucking studio. So unfortunately, I have to think that by cocking up movies like this and Ghost Rider, Fox learned a lesson the next time they would try to make an R-rated movie. So in a way, this movie actually justifies its existence by paving the way and showing what not to do for better movies that came along down the road. Yeah, I'm done. Yours.
Once again, the defense would like to distract you with a lot of nonsense and things that don't actually apply to the subject at hand. I do enjoy it. It justifies its existence. Terrific. Sean Comer is defending Daredevil 2003 by talking at length and very nicely and very intelligently and very eloquently about Daredevil the Director's Cut, the movie that isn't fucking on trial. No one's putting Daredevil the Director's Cut on trial. We are talking Daredevil, the theatrical cut from 2003. And Sean's only argument against mine, he had two. One was valid. One was I still have a problem with. Okay, I missed the detail about Elektra's father. Fucking sue me. But I'm sorry. Batman's costume had purpose. Batman's costume specifically dealt with the point of he was trying to scare the shit out of people and blend in the shadows. How the fuck does red blend in at night? It was dark red. Yeah, okay. It's blood red first.
Okay. Wait. Pump your brakes, son. No, I'm looking at a can of Rockstar Pure Zero, which is sitting on my desk right now. The watermelon flavor. That is red. That is red as shit. That is like Arizona Coyotes home jersey red.
Let me ask you a question. I just want to ask you this one question. You're set to mug somebody. Let's not be pedantic and argue, well, I would never mug somebody. You're going to mug somebody. You are going to commit a street crime at night. I give you two choices. You can either wear black or you can wear red. Which one are you wearing?
Well, that depends. Is my name Daredevil? Does my name have the word devil in it? Because if so, I'm going to pick a shade of red.
And I still argue that name wasn't earned. He just this is I am the immortal Iron Fist. Oh, so you are, sir. La-di-da.
I'm sorry. Wait a
crazy person. Wait a minute.
Because I just realized something. No, you also missed why he was named Daredevil. You somehow didn't pick up on it. And actually, it's not that far off of something that was even pointed out in the TV series. It's the fact that that was one of his father's nicknames.
You're right. No, you're right. That is a detail that. You're right. That he fought like the devil, and therefore. But okay,
yeah, right.
Just hear me out on this point. Hear me out on this point. It does take a certain level of ego and theatricalness to decide you're going to give yourself. Okay, you know who? What movie makes a really fun point of this? Guardians of the Galaxy. Okay, Guardians of the Galaxy goes out of its way to point out the fact that when you give yourself a theatrical nickname, either you need to earn it or you sound silly. It's like it's not weird to give yourself it's not weird to give yourself a code name. That's my point. When it's an issue of the press is naming you based on your deeds or based on your image, that's one thing. And unless you're the immortal Iron Fist, it's a little silly to go around calling yourself some sort of comic book superhero name. Not in a world that's supposed to be presented as realistic.
Well, look, throughout the early parts of the movie, I don't think, and I could be wrong here, I don't think he actually goes about referring to himself as Daredevil. I think most of the time when other people are referring to him, he's just referred to as the Devil of Hell's Kitchen.
There's a DD on his costume. That's what I'm jumping up and down and screaming about.
And I gotta think that, and this was I will concede a little bit was badly explained, but they took a liberty with his backstory that they really shouldn't have. And go ahead, fire back with your foaming at the mouth, books is for burning rant if you want to. But in the comics, it made sense because I seem to recall, I believe that one of the reasons why he went with that was kind of because once upon a time he was actually kind of known around his neighborhood as a kid for quite the opposite. For being back then being basically cowardly, and he didn't sort of muster and harness his bravery until he lost his sight and his other senses became tuned up.
Here's the thing, and because we've got about 6 minutes left, and I want to get to a conclusion here.
By the way.
You take the DD off the costume, I don't make an issue out of it. Because, again, unless you're Batman and you are purposely trying to scare the shit out of people, I'm not getting why that needs to be there. It has no function unless you're being theatrical. And I didn't get the sense that he was doing the I am the knight, criminals are a cowardly lot routine. Because I'm willing to accept your argument that he chose leather because it's light in weight, but it'll also protect you from certain degrees of attacks. Okay, right. Point taken. But does the DD need to be there? Who's going to fucking see it? You're punching anyone that's going to see it. Why would you want it there in the first place? Why would you want
any... What's wrong with him wanting to have a bit of style?
Okay. Case... And case closed. Yeah. Well, I'm Daredevil, so you all. Have you met the Iron Fist? Ridiculous. So,
I would like to point out I haven't watched Iron Fist or Defenders yet. So.
Okay. Danny Rand likes to let people know he's the immortal Iron Fist. It's hilarious every time he does it. In any case, here's my 50 words or less on this movie. I don't hate it. It's like I said, it's a little hard to follow at times and stay interested in because, like I said, I truly believe it is a bunch of strung together scenes with very little plot. But the stuff with Bullseye is so fun, and when they finally get to it, it really does elevate the movie. Colin Farrell is hilarious, and his portrayal of Bullseye is outstanding. I agree, and I don't think Ben Affleck's as bad as all that. I mean, I don't believe he's like Halle Berry levels of Catwoman bad. There's a grimness that Michael Keaton was able to capture and still be interesting and dynamic on screen that Ben Affleck just swings and misses. And since so much of the movie is also featuring Jennifer Garner, who sucks, it just takes the movie down. But is the movie, I put on Facebook today that I was watching it in preparation for tonight, and, I had two people respond, but one person wanted to gouge their eyes out. The other person's like, oh, it's so bad. The movie isn't, I think, as bad as people say it is. It's got problems. I've illustrated many of them tonight, but we're not talking Ghost Rider bad, which, wait till we get to that. Or my other one, my other favorite, Ghost Rider 2, otherwise known as Ghost Rider on amphetamines. Yikes.
I would argue that I think now it's far worse than Daredevil. Don't get me wrong here, and I'm not going to so far as to actually call it objectively good, but I never exactly share the full-on hatred for the first Ghost Rider.
I just think Nicolas Cage is so over the top that it takes you out of the movie. Like, again, I don't think, is anyone directing him? We could spend the next half hour on this, and then we'll just have to add it to the 2018 schedule to talk about it and give it its due. But, there's a reason why there's directors on set, and you're not just letting actors go crazy and do whatever they want. And Ghost Rider is a really good example of why you need a director. That being said, I believe that is all that needs to be said about Daredevil, unless you have a 50 words or less you'd like to add or any burning desires.
Oh, I do have something that I would like to add. Affleck, again, when it comes to superhero movies, you have to have somebody who is physically, who is kinetically up for the part. And, Affleck was definitely up for that bit. I think he was a good match for that. And I got to give him credit where it's due. Another way in which this movie justifies its existence, it was a proving ground in which Ben showed that he could capture the brooding, constant seriousness that would go on to actually make him a surprisingly halfway decent Batman. So, paving the way for something good, it's a decent thing that this not good movie actually exists.
Well, Sean is from the Time Travelers Are Us attorney's office. Like, you see, retroactively looking at this movie, you have in the future something very, very good. I love that argument. You don't know it yet, but this piece of shit's actually gonna give us something really, really good 20 years from now. It's gonna be fantastic. Just you wait.
When we get around to Ghost Rider, I'm gonna have to refine a closely related argument in which I point out that yes, Nicolas Cage is certainly bad, but just give it another decade or so, he's going to make this terrible, awful movie based based on a series of really lame, cheesy Christian novels. It's somehow going to be even worse. It's going to make this look like The Deer Hunter. Just watch.
Okay. All right. So with that said, our next on trial will be, sometime in September. Our next on trial is actually going to be in a couple of weeks. It'll be September 14th. We'll be looking at the original It. It'll be the same week that we'll be reviewing the new It on Damn You Hollywood. And then 2 weeks after that, Sean's going to have the really easy lifting, just have his job handed to him as we review and place on trial Ballistic, X versus Severn. And he gets to prosecute that one. He just has to show up. I however, have the heavy lifting. I have the heavy lifting of actually having to figure out how I'm going to defend this thing. I've never seen it, but it's on a Netflix list of being one of the worst movies ever, and challenge accepted. So that's what we're doing in the month of September. September 14th, we're looking at It. September 28th, Ballistic, X versus Severn. In the meantime, what's going on?
Severn. Really?
Yes. Yeah.
Does the winner go on to fight Hoist Gracie in the finals?
X versus Severn. All right. This past week. Oh God. No Ken Shamrock, no Dan Severn.
Oh, but no chemo either.
No chemo. No guy coming out in a cross. Like I said, this past week, in honor of the Defenders, we looked at Daredevil, Guardian Devil. We did a review of the Defenders. On the Metal Hammer of Doom, we looked at the new KM FDM album, Hell Yeah. Next week, we have only 2 shows scheduled here on the Radulich and Broadcasting Network. We're going to do, Pat's going to come on. We're going to do a TV party tonight for Game of Thrones Season 1. I've never seen a single episode of this. I'm going to binge it this weekend, and I'll tell you all what I think on Tuesday, August 29th. The Metal Hammer of Doom, we should have back Mr. Robert Cooper by then, and we'll be looking at The Haunted, Strength in Numbers. That's all from me for now. What do you got going on in your world, sir?
Next week, I'm going to the Kansas City Renaissance Festival.
Woo! Right.
Yeah.
Are you doing any other writing or pod? Okay, go ahead.
I've got a blog I'm working on setting up. I just need to make the time to sit down and write my first entry. I kind of know where it's going to go, but I don't want to necessarily, in this case, fill in any more details because I've got this bad habit of really wanting to kind of get people excited about something I'm working on, and then something comes up, and I lose all focus, and it never actually gets done. So I'm just going to say that more updates as they become available, but yes, I'm putting feelers out there to get back to writing about all things nerdy, be they news, video games, wrestling. Y'all know I'm a huge music fan. Just anything and everything, because quite frankly, I can only write for finance websites and surveillance equipment websites and whatnot for so long before I just kind of want to try to gouge my eyes out if I could just get something new to talk about for a little bit. But in the meantime, I will just say my usual spiel consisting of thank you to everybody who downloads us, who listens live, however you choose to listen to us. Means the world to us. You are the reason, indeed, that we do what we do. Thank you, as always, to Jesse Starcher for that superb intro that I just love to hear every 2 weeks. Thank you to Jesse and Ben and Cole, guys who have just fed my growing love of comics over the last few years especially. And with that being said, I will just say that I'm Sean, you're not. Never dull your colors for someone else's canvas.
All right, court is now in recess. Be well, be safe, and behave.